God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Welcome to the Thursday Breathe in the Book meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Kelly, and I am an alcoholic. Hi, family. Are there any other alcoholics present? Yes, going to be a party. This is a little different from any other big book meetings. Have you guys been in big book meetings before? Do you have a big book to read? All right. So the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, usually what we first ask you when you come into the rooms is, do you got a big book, right? And when I first came in, I was like, well, that's awfully big. I do not want to read it. So it's separated in two parts, FYI. The first part is the first 164 pages of the book. The second part is our stories. The stories change with each edition. The first part does not change, okay? The first part is the 164 that outlines our program, and it's here on the contents page in the very beginning of the book. Any questions so far? Like I said, there's been 4 different editions of the big book. There's stories, and then there's the 164 that outlines our program in the beginning of the book. The books up here are just the 164 pages, the program part, which is outlined here, okay? Tonight, we are going to be in chapter 10 to the employers, all right? So up until this point, this is what we've already read. The preface that starts off saying, we don't change the 164. There's a strong sentiment against any radical change being made to the first 164 pages of the big book. And we hope when you read this, you might read either the stories or something in the first part of the book that says, makes you go, oh, I felt like that. I think I might be an alcoholic. I think this might work for me, right? Then there's forwards. There's 4 different forwards for the 4 different editions. The first one says the main purpose of this book is to show you precisely how we have recovered. Okay? In the forward to the second, we throw in some history. The forward to the third and the fourth talks about how much we've grown and all the different countries and people that have joined AA and have recovered from a seemingly hopeless disease over the years. Okay? The big book starts at the doctor's opinion. We have 2 founders, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. This is not Dr. Bob. This is Dr. Silkworth, the man that treated Bill before AA began. And then, going forward, 40 to 50,000 alcoholics over the years. He was at Towns Hospital in New York. We went to him and basically asked him to do an introduction to the big book, which describes, first off, the allergy that we suffer from. Okay? He writes 2 different letters. He talks about the phenomenon of craving. He talks about us needing to heal spiritually, that these doctors we've done everything we can, and we still don't know how to fix you guys. No synthetic knowledge, no pill that we've come up with can fix you guys, but whatever these men have to say seems to work. He talks about frothy emotional appeal. No human power has been able to get us to stop because we're irritable, restless, and discontent, and that balloon will pop one way or another unless we have some kind of spiritual healing, right? Right after that, chapter 1 is Bill's story, our first founder. Just like in a speaker meeting, he tells a story, how many times he tried the incomprehensible demoralization. Self-knowledge didn't work, and then getting shaky, stealing from his wife's purse, depression, until the message was carried to him and the importance of carrying it to another. Right after that, in chapter 2, we all chime in and we go, a lot of us were just like Bill. You might be one of us, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and we go on to describe a little bit more. In more about alcoholism, we have a few different examples, just like in a participation meeting where different people tell their story. Well, we've got Fred the accountant, the jaywalker, and in there, maybe one of those little stories gets you to go, ooh, that's me. I think I might be an alcoholic. And up until this point, we've talked about spirituality or the spirit healing a lot, right? So we have a whole chapter dedicated to don't overthink the God thing. Basically, alone, I lack that power to be able to get sober, right? And when I drink, I can't control how much I drink. So I lack that power to bring myself back to sanity and not drink anymore. So if I just realize that, sometimes that's enough to continue on with the rest of the steps. Don't overthink step 2. It's not that you've got to define God. It's in the coming to realize that we're not it. Okay? In chapter 5, how it works, we start with we read it in meetings, right? And after the steps, we go, our description of the alcoholic, what we've read so far, the chapter to the agnostics, our personal adventures, all throughout all these chapters. Make clear these 3 pertinent ideas. Oh my gosh, I'm an alcoholic. No human power has been able to relieve my alcoholism. God could and would if he were sought, or something bigger than me is going to be able to help return me to sanity, right? Being convinced of that, I'm now at step 3, and I can learn about self-will run riot and going, what you got for me? Let me just walk through what's in front of me today so I can better do your will and help somebody else, right? And then an inventory. In chapter 5, we also talk about the 4th step, which is really a bunch of little inventories to learn a few facts about ourselves. We talk about resentment, fear, and sex. But while we're doing that, we're also gaining some understanding about our character defects and our amends that we have to make. When we get into chapter 6, into action, it starts off with, now that we've done that inventory, we're going to read it to a sponsor. We're going to disclose to God and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And through there, we come up with what things are going to keep us from helping others, our character defects, and what amends we need to make to clear up the wreckage of our past. Also, in chapter 6, it talks about 10 and 11, how we keep in check what we've done today. Have I harmed anyone? Do I owe an amends? Right? Have I done any of those things that we just reviewed in that big old inventory that we did, right? And then in working with others, chapter 7 is how, now that we've had this spiritual awakening, we're healed, how we can reach our hand out to another and say, I've done that, I can help. We don't talk down, we don't criticize, we just offer our assistance as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous that's done the work through the book. Any questions so far? All right. Right after that, to the wives, to the family afterwards, to the employers. Now these chapters, remember when we made this book in 1939, we didn't specifically know that just alcoholics were going to buy it. Employers were going to buy it. Family members, wives that had drunk husbands at home were going to buy it, right? So those chapters are pretty much dedicated and geared toward other people other than us, right? Also, we didn't have Al-Anon and the family groups after, you know what I mean? At that time, it was just us. In A Vision for You, how many people remember reading that in a meeting? They go, who wants to read A Vision for You? A Vision for You, the reading is the last page of the 164 pages. And that whole chapter is where Bill kind of sums it all up, sums up that first section of the book. And at the very last page, he goes, because we had 3 years sober when we wrote this book, we really didn't know a whole lot. But we start off with, we realize we know only little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. In other words, here's our book, don't die. Right? So, where we're at tonight, we've done all our steps. We're learning how to help others. We've talked about the family afterwards and us getting adjusted now that we're so excited about sobriety. Or we're trying to put our life, get a job and all this other stuff, right? We're not a glum lot. That's what we read last week. And now we're going to read about to the employers. And that would be on page 136. The other thing, in this meeting, only one person reads. That would be me. But during the reading, we really encourage crosstalk or questions. Shout stuff out. If there's something you don't understand, just shout it out. Like, we get to Armistice Day, somebody can just go, what's Armistice Day? Oh, and somebody else might answer it, okay? It's like we're all just sitting on the couch getting to know this book together, okay? Any questions? But during the reading, it's not the time for checking in and sharing for 10 minutes. But questions, please, please, shout them out. I encourage that. Because after the reading, then we will go for a half an hour or till 7:30 on sharing about what we read. Okay? So let's get started. On page 136. Now, a little bit of history. How many people were here when we read the doctor's opinion? Okay. At the very back of the doctor's opinion, the doctor at the very end, right here, where he goes, whatever these men have to say seems to work, right? He goes, and often I get a good feeling every time I think of 2 of you people that helped promote this book or get this book going. One was Hank Pankhurst, right? That's the man with pathological deterioration. And then the next paragraph is the man that hid away in the barn, deserted barn, determined to die. That was Fitz. Both of their stories, Hank's story was taken out of the first edition of the book. His story was The Unbeliever. And if anybody ever wants to read any of the stories taken out of the first, second, and third edition, you can look at the book Experience, Strength, and Hope. Okay, those are all the stories taken out. Hank's is the very first story taken out of the book. But it is said that if Bill didn't write the big book, we wouldn't have a big book if Bill didn't write it and if Hank didn't help publish it. He helped gather the money for us to put out our very first book. So a very important part of our history is Hank. And Hank is the one that wrote to the employers. So, chapter 10. Among many employers nowadays, we think one member, that would be Hank, who has spent much of his life in the world of big business. He has hired and fired hundreds of men. He knows the alcoholic as the employer sees him. His present views ought to prove exceptionally useful to businessmen everywhere. But let him tell you. I was at one time an assistant manager of a corporate department employing 6,600 men. One day my secretary came in saying that Mr. B insisted on speaking with me. I told her to say that I wasn't interested. I had warned him several times that he had but one more chance. Not long after, he had called me from Hartford on 2 successive days, so drunk he could hardly speak. I told him he was through, finally and forever. My secretary returned to say that it was not Mr. B on the phone, it was Mr. B's brother, and he wished to give me a message. I still expected a plea for clemency. Does everybody know what that means? Do you ever get really drunk, can't call into work yourself, and you get your brother to do it, or somebody else? Call my boss. So that's what he's expecting. He's expecting, a plea for clemency or, another story. But these words came through the receiver. The receiver is the other end of a telephone we used to hold by hand. All right. I just wanted to tell you that Paul jumped from a hotel window in Hartford last Saturday. He left us a note saying you were the best boss he ever had, and that you were not to blame in any way. Wow. Another time, as I opened a letter which lay on my desk, a newspaper clipping fell out. It was the obituary of one of the best salesmen I had ever had. After 2 weeks of drinking, he had placed his toe on the trigger of a loaded shotgun. The barrel was in his mouth. I had discharged or fired him for drinking 6 weeks earlier. Still another experience, a woman's voice from Virginia. She wanted to know if her husband's company insurance was still in force. 4 days before, he had hanged himself in his woodshed. I had been obliged to discharge him or fire him for drinking. Though he was brilliant, alert, and one of the best organizers I'd ever known. Here are 3 exceptional men lost to this world because he's speaking of himself as an employer, I did not understand alcoholism as I do now. What irony. I became an alcoholic myself. And but for the intervention of an understanding person, I might have followed in their footsteps. My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars, for it takes real money to train a man for an executive position. This kind of waste goes on unbated. We think the business fabric is shot through with situations which might be helped by better understanding all around. Everybody get that? Shot through. Like kind of if you had a shotgun and it had a bunch of holes in, let's say, a piece of plastic, right? Psh. So he's just saying it's riddled throughout the business world. Cases of us alcoholics in the workforce. And many more because of not understanding. Nearly every modern employer feels a moral responsibility for the well-being of his help. He tries to meet these responsibilities. That he has not always done so for the alcoholic is easily understood. To him, the alcoholic has often seemed a fool of the first magnitude. Because of the employer's special ability or of his own strong personal attachment to him, the employer has sometimes kept such a man at work long beyond a reasonable period. Some employers have tried every known remedy. In only a few instances has there been a lack of patience and tolerance, and we, alcoholics, who have imposed on the best of employers, can scarcely blame them if they have been short with us. Here, for instance, is a typical example. An officer of one of the largest banking institutions in America knows I no longer drink. I was told that this is City National Bank in Cleveland, and the man we're about to talk about is Clarence Snyder. Clarence Snyder's story was in the big book, in the original manuscript, the first, second, and third edition, and it's the Home Brewmeister. if anybody wants to write that down. Okay. Clarence also died with 46 years sober in 1984. So, here's an example. He's saying one of the officers at a big bank called him up knowing that he didn't drink anymore. One day he told me about an executive of the same bank who, from his description, was undoubtedly alcoholic. This seemed to me like an opportunity to be helpful. So I spent 2 hours talking about alcoholism, the malady, and described the symptoms and results as well as I could. His comment was, very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. He has just returned from a 3-month leave of absence, has taken a cure, looks fine. And to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him this was his last chance. How many people ever, it's like, no, we already warned him. I told him if he drank again, he's fired, so that's got to do it. Yeah, worked for me, right? No. How many people did it ever work for when you went to the judge said, if you come back into my court drunk, okay, I promise I won't. Darn! Right? So he said that the board of directors told this guy it was his last chance. The only answer I could make was that if the man followed the usual pattern, he would go on a bigger bust drunk than ever. I felt this was inevitable and wondered if the bank was doing the man an injustice. Why not bring him into contact with some of our alcoholic crowd? He might have a chance. I pointed out that I had had nothing to drink whatsoever for 3 years, and this in the face of difficulties that would have made 9 out of 10 men drink their heads off. Why not at least afford him an opportunity to hear my story? Oh no, said my friend. This chap is either through with liquor or he's minus a job. If he has your willpower and guts, he'll make the grade. He'll do what's right. I wanted to throw my hands up in discouragement, for I saw that I had failed to help my banker friend understand. He simply could not believe that his brother, his fellow executive, suffered from a serious illness. There was nothing to do but wait. Presently, this man did slip and was fired. Following his discharge, we contacted him. Without much ado, he accepted the principles and procedures that had helped us. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous, as we know it now, right? He is undoubtedly on the road to recovery. To me, this incident illustrates lack of understanding as to what really ails the alcoholic and lack of knowledge as to what part employers might profitably take in salvaging their sick employees. If you desire to help, it might be well to disregard your own drinking or lack of it. Whether you are a hard drinker, a moderate drinker, or a teetotaler. How many teetotalers in the room? I love that. All right. Whether you are a hard drinker, a moderate drinker, or held your pinky up and sipped every once in a while, you may have had some pretty strong opinions, perhaps prejudice. Remember, prejudice are those things we don't like it. If I have a prejudice against something, I don't like it. Those who drink moderately may be more annoyed with an alcoholic than a total abstainer who would be. Drinking occasionally and understanding your own reaction, it is possible for you to become quite sure of many things which, so far as the alcoholic is concerned, are not always so. As a moderate drinker, you can take your liquor or leave it alone. Whenever you want, you can control your drinking. Of an evening, you can go on a mild bender, get up in the morning, shake your head, and go to business. To you, liquor is no real problem. You cannot see why it should be to anyone else, save the spineless and the stupid. So what he's saying is if the employer himself drinks, and sometimes maybe drinks heavily, but it's never affected him like it does this guy, that there's a world of ignorance sometimes when people don't understand the alcoholic. When dealing with an alcoholic, there may be a natural annoyance that a man could be so weak, stupid, and irresponsible. Even when you understand the malady better, you may feel this feeling rising. You look at the alcoholic in your organization is many times illuminating. Is he not usually brilliant, fast-thinking, imaginative, and likable? When sober, does he not work hard and have a knack for getting things done? If he had those qualities and did not drink, would he be worth retaining or keeping? Should he have the same consideration as other ailing employees? Is he worth salvaging? Is your decision a yes? Whether the reason be humanitarian or business or both, then the following suggestions may be helpful. He's saying, so if you take the alcoholic and you take this guy over here who broke his leg and was out of work for a month, both very good employees, would you still keep this one? Would you still keep him? You got to kind of weigh it out. If that's the case, then these are the suggestions. Can you discard the feeling that you're dealing with only a habit with stubbornness or a weak will? If this presents difficulty, rereading chapter 2 and 3, where the alcoholic sickness is discussed at length, may be worthwhile. Remember, chapter 2 and chapter 3. There is a solution. And more about alcoholism when we talk about the jaywalker and Fred the accountant and all that. Okay. You as a businessman want to know the necessities before considering the result. If you concede, if you agree that your employee is ill, can he be forgiven for what he has done in the past? Can his past absurdities be forgotten? Can it be appreciated that he has been a victim of crooked thinking, directly caused by the action of alcohol in his brain? Well, I remember the shock I received when a prominent doctor in Chicago told me of cases where pressure of the spinal fluid actually ruptured the brain. No wonder an alcoholic is strangely irrational. Who wouldn't be with such a fevered brain? Normal drinkers are not so affected, nor can they understand the aberrations of the alcoholic. Your man has probably been trying to conceal a number of scrapes, perhaps messy ones. They may be disgusting. You may be at a loss to understand how such a seemingly above-board chap could be so involved. But these scrapes, these scrapes can generally be charged, no matter how bad, to the abnormal action of alcohol on his mind. When drinking or getting over a bout, a drunk, an alcoholic, sometimes the model of honesty, when normal, will do incredible things. Afterwards, his revulsion will be terrible. Nearly always, these antics indicate nothing more than a temporary condition. Everybody got that paragraph? Raise your hand if you don't, because sometimes I had to read these like twice when I was reading them. When we get drunk, the things we do are so stupid. If we can charge it off, we can dismiss it and keep going sometimes, right? And sometimes then when we come back, we're just polished up and ready to go, and we're the best employee, and then we kind of do it again, and it's terrible. It's revolting. This is not to say that all alcoholics are honest and upright when not drinking. Of course, that isn't so. And such people often may impose on you. Seeing your attempt to understand and help, some men will try to take advantage of your kindness. If you are sure your man does not want to stop, he may well be discharged or fired. The sooner the better. You are not doing him any favors by keeping him on. Firing such an individual may prove a blessing to him. It may be just the jolt he needs. I know, in my own particular case, that nothing my company could have done would have stopped me for so long as I was able to hold my position. I could not possibly realize how serious my situation was. Had they fired me first, and had they taken the steps to see that I was presented with the solution contained in this book, I might have returned to them 6 months later, a well man. But there are many men who want to stop, and with them you can go far. Your understanding treatment of their case will pay in dividends, will bring lots of blessings. Perhaps you have such a man in mind. He wants to quit drinking, and you want to help him, even if it be only a matter of good business. You now know more about alcoholism. You can see he is mentally and physically sick. You are willing to overlook his past performances. Suppose an approach is made something like this. State that you know about his drinking. I hated that talk with my employer. What? State that you know about his drinking. and that it must stop. You might say you appreciate his abilities. You'd like to keep him, but you cannot if he continues to drink. A firm attitude at this point has helped many of us. Next, he can be assured that you do not intend to lecture, moralize, or condemn. That if this was done formally, it was because of a misunderstanding. If it was done before this, it was because of a misunderstanding. If possible, express a lack of hard feeling toward him. At this point, it might be well to explain alcoholism, the illness. Say that you believe he is gravely ill person with this qualification, being perhaps fatally ill. Does he want to get well? You ask because many alcoholics, being warped and drugged, do not want to quit. But does he? Will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? If he says yes, does he really mean it? Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah, I do. In the back of my mind, I knew I was going to go home and drink again, right? Does he really mean it? Or down inside, does he think he's fooling you? And that after rest and treatment, he will be able to get away with it a few drinks now and then. We believe a man should be thoroughly probed on these points. Be satisfied he is not deceiving himself or you. Whether you mention this book is a matter for your own discretion. If he temporizes, isn't quite sure, right? If he temporizes and still thinks he can ever drink again, even beer, he might as well be discharged or fired after the next bender or drunk, which, if an alcoholic, he is almost certain to have. He should understand that emphatically, very seriously. Make it clear. Either you are dealing with a man who can and will get well, or you are not. If not, why waste time with him? This may seem severe, but it is usually the best course. After satisfying yourself that your man wants to recover and that he will go to any extreme to do so, you may suggest a definite course of action. For most alcoholics who are drinking or who are just getting over a spree, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative, important. The matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred to your own doctor. Whatever the methods, its object is to thoroughly clear mind and body of the effects of alcohol. In competent hands, this seldom takes long, nor is very expensive. Your man will fare better if placed in such a physical condition that he can think straight and no longer craves liquor. Remember, we didn't have detoxes in these days, right? There weren't many places, and even hospitals didn't really understand how to treat us, right? If you propose such a procedure to him, it may be necessary to advance the cost of treatment, but we believe it should be made plain that any expense will later be deducted from his pay. It's better for him to feel fully responsible rather than that gift just being given to him. If your man accepts your offer, it should be pointed out that physical treatment is but a small part of the picture. Though you are providing him with the best possible medical attention, he should understand that he must undergo a change of heart. To get over drinking will require transformation of thought and attitude. We all had to place recovery above everything else, for without recovery, we would have lost both home and business. Can you have every confidence in his ability to recover? While on the subject of confidence, can you adopt the attitude that so far as you are concerned, this will be a strictly personal matter, that his alcoholic derelicts, his escapades, the treatment about to be undertaken will never be discussed without his consent? It might be well to have a long chat with him on his return. I always thought they had a whole big sales meeting and everybody knew where I was and what was going on. To return to the subject matter of this book, it contains full suggestions by which the employer may solve his problem. To you, some of the ideas which it contains are novel. Perhaps you are not quite in sympathy with the approach we suggest. By no means do we offer it as the last word on the subject, but so far as we are concerned, it has worked with us. After all, you are not looking for results rather than methods. Whether your employee likes it or not, he will learn the grim truth about alcoholism. That won't hurt him a bit, even though he does not go for this remedy. We suggest you draw the book to the attention of the doctor who is to attend your patient during treatment. If the book is read the moment the patient is able, while acutely depressed, detoxing, realizing of his condition may come to him. We hope the doctor will tell the patient the truth about his condition, whatever that happens to be. When the man is presented with this volume, this book, it is best that no one tell him he must abide by its suggestions. The man must decide for himself. So they're actually telling the employer, you can't basically give the guy a book, say you have to go see my doctor and you must read this or you don't have a job. They're basically letting them know that if you can keep him and it's going to be profitable for your company, you got to kind of weigh it out. Do you think he's serious? Does he want to quit? Or is he just, playing you along? Is he worthwhile and more of a positive input to the company when sober that you're willing to invest this in him? And one of the suggestions they're saying is let him pay back for whatever treatment or money they put out of their pocket to get you treatment at the time. You are betting, of course, that your changed attitude plus the contents of this book will turn the trick. In some cases it will, and in others it may not. But we think that if you persevere, the percentage of successes will gratify you. As our work spreads and our numbers increase, we hope your employees may be put in personal contact with some of us, sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Meanwhile, we are sure a great deal can be accomplished by the use of this book alone. On your employee's return, talk to him. Ask him if he thinks he has the answer. If he feels free to discuss his problems with you. If he knows you understand and will not be upset by anything he wishes to say, he will probably be off to a fast start. In this connection, can you remain undisturbed if the man proceeds to tell you the shocking things? He may, for example, reveal that he's padded his expense account or that he has planned to take your best customers away from you. In fact, he may say almost anything if he has accepted our solution, which, as you know, demands rigorous honesty. Can you charge this off, brush it off, as you would a bad account, and start fresh with him? If he owes you money, you may wish to make terms, make arrangements for him to pay it back. If he speaks of his home situation, you can undoubtedly make helpful suggestions. Can he talk frankly with you so long as he does not bear business tales or criticize his associates? With this kind of employee, such an attitude will command undying loyalty. The greatest enemies of us alcoholics are resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. Wherever men are gathered together in business, there will be rivalries, and arising out of these, a certain amount of office politics. Sometimes we alcoholics have an idea that people are trying to pull us down. Anybody ever feel that way? They're out to get me. Often this is not so at all, but sometimes our drinking will be used politically. One instance comes to mind in which a malicious individual was always making friendly little jokes about an alcoholic's drinking exploits. In this way, he was slyly carrying tales. In another case, an alcoholic was sent to a hospital for treatment. Only a few knew of it at first, but within a short time, it was billboard throughout the entire company. Naturally, this sort of thing decreased the man's chance of recovery. The employer can many times protect the victim from this kind of talk, the alcoholic who's coming back, right? The employer cannot play favorites, but he can always defend a man from needless provocation and unfair criticism. Remember provocation? We used that a couple times in the book already. Provoke, to poke the bear. Okay. As a class, as us, right? Alcoholics are energetic people. They work hard and they play hard. Your man should be on his mettle to make good. Being somewhat weakened and faced with physical and mental readjustment to life, which knows no alcohol, he may overdo. You may have to curb his desire to work 16 hours a day and make it up to his boss, right? You may need to encourage him to play once in a while. He may wish to do a lot for other alcoholics and sometimes Something of this sort may come up during business hours. A reasonable amount of leeway or latitude will be helpful. This work is necessary to maintain his sobriety. After your, what do you think he means there? Maybe if we want to go to, I want to go to a noon meeting, right? And it's so I might leave a few minutes before noon and come back. Is that okay? Maybe the boss goes, well, absolutely. No, I understand. Just between you and him. If you have a boss you can talk to like that. After your man has gone along without drinking for a few months, you may be able to make use of his service with other employees who are giving you the alcoholic runaround, provided, of course, they are willing to have a third party in the picture. An alcoholic who has recovered but holds a relatively unimportant job can talk to a man with a better position. Being on a radically different basis of life, he will never take advantage of the situation. So, I have had the opportunity to work in companies where there weren't a lot of alcoholics, sober alcoholics, and I've worked in companies where there are a lot of sober alcoholics. Either case, my own personal decision is that I let people know if there's ever something that I can do for anybody else. You know what I mean? And I get calls from places I used to work at or whatever. I wanted to know if you could talk to Susie or whatever. I don't know if you guys have had that, but it is your own personal choice. But it's something, if you have that talk with the employer has a talk with the employee coming back to let them know that maybe these are some of the courses you guys can take together so that you can further our service work. Your man can be trusted. Long experience with alcoholic excuses naturally arouse suspicion. So next time, when his wife calls saying he's sick, you might jump to the conclusion he's really drunk. If he is and is still trying to recover, he will tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job. For he knows he must be honest if he were to live at all. He will appreciate knowing you are not bothering your head about him, that you are not suspicious, nor are you trying to run his life so he will be shielded from temptation to drink. If he is conscientiously following the program of recovery, he can go anywhere your business may call him. So they're telling that to the employer, right? The employer might be suspicious any little time we call in sick going, oh no, they did it again. And maybe that's true. He's just saying, sometimes we stumble a few times before we grasp a hold of this, right? In case he does stumble, even once, you will have to decide whether to let him go. If you are sure he doesn't mean business, there is no doubt you should discharge him or fire him. If, on the contrary, you are sure he is doing his utmost, you may wish to give him another chance. But you should feel under no obligation to keep him on, for your obligation has been well discharged already. You've already shown good by trying to help him out, right? There is another thing you might wish to do. If your organization is a large one, your junior executives might be provided with this book. You might let them know you have no quarrel with the alcoholic of your organization. These juniors are often in a difficult position. Men under them are frequently their friends. So for one reason or another, they cover for these men, hoping matters will take a turn for the better. They often jeopardize their own positions in trying to help serious drinkers who should have been fired long ago, or else given an opportunity to get well. So they're saying this might prove some understanding to the executives or junior executives under you in your company that don't understand alcoholism so they can recognize it. After reading this book, a junior executive can go to such a man and say approximately this: look here, Ed, do you want to stop drinking or not? You put me on the spot every time you get drunk. It isn't fair to me or the firm. I have been learning something about alcoholism. If you're an alcoholic, you are a mighty sick man. If you act like one. The firm wants to help you get over it. If you're not interested, there's the way out. If you take it, your past will be forgotten. And in fact, that you went away for treatment will not be mentioned. But if you cannot or will not stop drinking, I think you ought to resign. Your junior executive may not agree with the contents of our book. He need not, and often should not show this book to alcoholic prospect. But at least he will understand the problem and will no longer be misled by ordinary promises. He will be able to take a position with such a man which is eminently fair and square. He will have no further reason for covering up an alcoholic employee. It boils right down to this. No man should be fired just because he's an alcoholic. If he wants to stop, he should be afforded a real chance. If he cannot or does not want to stop, he should be discharged or fired. The exceptions are few. We think this method of approach will accomplish several things. It will permit rehabilitation of good men. At the same time, you will feel no reluctance to rid yourself of those who cannot or will not stop. Alcoholism may be causing your organization considerable damage in its waste of time, men, and reputation. We hope our suggestions will help you plug up this sometimes serious leak. We think we are sensible when we urge that you stop this waste and give your worthwhile man a chance. The other day, an approach was made to the vice president of a large industrial concern. He remarked, "I'm mighty glad you fellows got over your drinking, but the policy of this company is not to interfere with the habits of our employees. If a man drinks so much that his job suffers, we fire him. I don't see how you can be of any help to us. As you see, we don't have any alcoholic problem." This same company spends millions for research every year. Their cost of production is figured to a fine decimal point. They have recreational facilities, there's a company insurance, there's a real interest, both humanitarian and business, in the well-being of their employees. But alcoholism, well, they just don't believe they have it. Perhaps this is a typical attitude. We who have collectively seen a great deal of business life, at least from the alcoholic angle, had to smile at this gentleman's sincere opinion. He might be shocked if he knew how much alcoholism is costing his organization a year. That company may harbor many actual or potential alcoholics. We believe that managers of large enterprises often have little idea how prevalent the problem is. Even if you feel your organization has no alcohol problem, it might pay to take another look down the line. You may make some interesting discoveries. Of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics, sick people, deranged men. Hey! What our friend, the vice president, had in mind was the habitual or whoopee drinker. So we got the teetotaler, the whoopee drinker, and as to them, his policy is undoubtedly sound, but he did not distinguish between such people and the alcoholic. It is not to be expected that an alcoholic employee will receive a disproportionate amount of time and attention. He should not be made a favorite. The right kind of man, the kind who recovers, will not want this sort of thing. He will not impose. Far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you till his dying day. That means after we get sober and they've given us another chance, right? Can I just add right here, I have over 20 years of sobriety. And the reason I'm here today is because the man that was my boss took me to a detox. And I call him and they say, well, thank you to his dying day. Every day before my birthday's May 6th, and on May 5th, I always call him and try to keep back the tears. And we're talking 21 years now. But I always call him up and thank him for that day, the day before my sobriety date, for saving my life. So, it always reminds me of him when I read this chapter. He will work like the devil and thank you till his dying day. Today, I own a little company. There are two. They say it's Jim Burwell, The Vicious Cycle, who wrote The Vicious Cycle, and Bill Wilson. I'm not sure whether I haven't found record of whether it's Bill that he's talking about here. If you guys, when you read the 12 and 12, or if we read it, there's a point where it talks about Jim Burwell, a man who worked for this company and how he came back and then he had to have an understanding, his own understanding. He was an atheist, yes. And that's why we came up with the God of our understanding. Yeah. All right, so there are 2 alcoholic employees who produce as much as 5 normal salesmen. But why not? They have a new attitude, and they have been saved from a living death. I have enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out. See Appendix 6. We shall be happy to hear from you if we can be of service. Yay!